Yeah, so a funny thing about Conophytum seed capsules and most other members of that family is that they're sensitive to moisture. It'll open up in response to water. And so if I spray the seed capsules here.
Oh, that one I think already opened up.
Yeah.
That one right there. That's very cool. Thank you for showing us that.
All right, no problem.
It's like a little Conophytum party trick. Well, let me give you a little bit of context for this because I met Matthew at the Connecticut Cactus and Succulent Society show. You brought some of your beautiful Conophytums and a number of others.
Right.
Give me a little bit of your background and how you got into some of these smaller plants that you'd normally see in like South Africa.
Yeah, so going way back, I grew up in New York and visited the New York Botanical Garden and had a friend of the family who had a small hobby greenhouse where he grew some Conophytums and other South African succulents. So, definitely was interested from a pretty young age. A few of those are still hanging on, some old Conophytums and lithops.
And did you ever head over to South Africa and see them in the wild, or did you?
I was a grad student for a while, and I actually did a PhD studying the morphology and evolution of the genus Conophytum, which are some of these little living stones from South Africa.
Right.
And so, yeah, I traveled, had 3 trips to South Africa when I was a grad student for a couple of months each time during the southern winter, which is when these plants grow. And yeah, I had collecting permits and was traveling around with some botanists from South Africa and elsewhere. Spent a pretty good amount of time there, found a lot of interesting things out in the veld.
That's great. Well, let's see some of the morphology because it is a really unique morphology.
Right.
All I can think of is that they have unique leaves, they have this little window, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
So we're here during the summertime, which is definitely their off-season.
Right.
So the genus Conophytum, they come from western South Africa and adjacent parts of Namibia is where they're from. And it's a winter rainfall desert where they are, and somewhat into Mediterranean sorts of climates near Cape Town. So they grow during the winter time, which is cool and relatively rainy, or as rainy as it's going to get. And during the summertime, it's hot and dry, and they're very much dormant. We're really getting into their dormant period this time of year.
Now, when they go dormant, do they sink back into the earth, or do they just kind of desiccate?
Yeah, some of them do. Some of them are kind of like lithops or baby toes, Fenestraria, where they're a window plant that's mostly buried in the ground, kind of embedded in the soil. And they do tend to kind of pull down into the soil during their dormant period when it gets too hot and dry to grow, and sometimes disappear entirely. So some Conophytums are like that. And it's part of the reason I was interested in studying them is that there's a lot of variation though. So some of them are more like kind of small shrubs, a lot of them are kind of cushion plants, tight, almost stemless clusters of succulent leaves forming a very tight mound. But yeah, some of them are window plants with a clear area on top of the plant that lets in sunlight. Those are the ones that tend to pull underground when they're going dormant.
Okay, describe that window for me, because maybe some people are not familiar with it. Is the chlorophyll like on the inside then of the plant, or what does that window do?
So some of those are down here. And again, I got to apologize. A lot of them are pretty dormant right now.
That's okay. It's important for people to see these, because if you're planning on having these at any point in time, you would think that maybe some of these would be dead and you'd want to toss them away, but you're just saying that they're going through a period.
Here's the one that's showing some fresh foliage anyway. So this is a plant of several plants of Conophytum chrysectum, which is in the section Ophthalmophyllum, which are some of the window plants. So these are almost like cylindrical things. They probably go an inch or so underground beneath the soil surface. And the top, it's translucent. It sort of doesn't have any chlorophyll. The top surface of these bodies, which are a pair of very modified succulent water-storing leaves. The top's translucent, that lets in sunlight. The interior of the plant is pretty much transparent. It's this kind of clear water-storing tissue.
Right.
And it's almost like fiber optics. The light is transmitted through the top of the leaf, travels through this clear water-storing tissue in the interior, to the green photosynthetic tissue, which is around the base and the outer edges of the leaves, which are buried underground. So photosynthesis takes place there. Most of the plant is buried underground, protected from heat and excess sun, and also grazing animals, and just that top surface with the little window is exposed to let in sunlight for the plant.
And tell me a little bit about the grit and the substrate that you're growing them in, and if that mimics any of the...
Right, yeah. So the soil they're in is mostly inorganic, or almost completely inorganic in most cases. It's sort of a loamy subsoil, sandy subsoil, with some extra sand and pumice and perlite and vermiculite and other inorganic soil components to provide a little bit of extra drainage, a little bit of ability to hold water and nutrients. Sort of a special cactus and succulent mix without much in the way of peat moss or coir or other organic components to it.
And are you ever fertilizing these? And if so, what would that look like?
They get a tiny amount of fertilizer. So I'd say maybe a couple times during the growing season for September to April or so is mostly when they're growing. They get a little shot at maybe half strength or quarter strength balanced fertilizer, but very little for the mature plants. When I'm growing seedlings, the seeds are very tiny. They sprout, there's tiny little seedlings, and it's sort of good to push them along and force them to grow. So I do fertilize the seedlings with dilute fertilizer more often, especially during their first year, just to get them going.
So something like this wouldn't be a window plant, right?
Right, yeah. So this is Conophytum calculus.
So fun.
Yeah.
It's like a bunch of grapes.
Yeah, it's sort of a big old specimen here. One of my collections from South Africa. Like I said, I had permits and collected some seeds and some little cuttings when I was there doing my research. Conophytum calculus, it comes from an area called the Knersvlakte. It's a very arid little valley, kind of on the inner parts of the coastal plain, Western Cape province of South Africa primarily. Sort of the defining characteristic of the Knersvlakte, it's low arid hills, and the soil is often covered by white quartz pebbles. And those areas, the quartz flats that are covered by all this white quartz, is often where little succulents like Conophytum calculus and its relatives grow. So yeah, it sort of hides down among the quartz pebbles. It's not so camouflaged as some of them, but it is definitely a little bit rock-like maybe.
Now, are these edible to animals? Because they look like little jewels of succulent goodness.
It's a funny thing. One of the things that turned up in my research and other people's research on their anatomy and their chemistry is that the really embedded ones, the window plant type ones that are mostly underground, don't have much in the way of chemical defenses.
Right.
They are just sort of salty water on the inside, so they would be edible. Ones like this that are more exposed tend to have a ton of tannins in them, like the chemicals that are in tea.
Very astringent, yeah.
Yeah, it'll sort of make your
Bitter.
mouth pucker.
Yep.
So these are not so edible, definitely. This family in general has alkaloids in them. I'm not sure exactly. No, I don't think anybody's really done much work on what might be in Conophytum, but presumably they have some other chemical defenses like that as well.
Well, sometimes the alkaloids make really good medicinal plants, so I'm sure some of the locals, if they had tested some
so there are some things in this family. I don't think specifically Conophytum that I've heard of, but there are things like Scaledium, which is, I think one of the common names is Kana, which are chewed for the alkaloids.
Fascinating.
For medicinal purposes and recreational purposes.
Now, some of these actually look variegated, but they just seem two different colors of chlorophyll. Maybe it's because it's going...
Yeah, so it's something like that. It's actually, you're seeing it kind of in the messy process of going dormant for the summertime. So they'll have their leaves will be out for the growing season during the cooler months. And this time of year, spring, early summer, the old leaves from the previous growing season dry up and they turn yellow or different colors. It's almost like autumn foliage around here. And then dry up. And then for most of the summer, the plants really just kind of hide down underneath the dried remains of their old leaves.
Now, how do they start?
So you get this sort of papery covering over the outside of the plant.
Yeah, it looks like a papyraceae, like, kind of an Avonia or something.
Right,
where they get the little paper.
Yeah. A little bit of the same lines as what you see with Avonia.
How do they start coming back? Like, where does the green start to show up? Do they start to push up from underneath? Or?
So the old leaves are just really a very thin, papery covering.
Yeah.
And as the new leaves expand at the beginning of the next growing season in early fall, that'll just split open.
I see.
The new leaf will be exposed then.
This looks a bit more like you were describing cushiony.
Yeah. So that's Conophytum bilobum. And
two lobes.
It's pretty widespread one, and you can see a little bit of what the morphology is of those plant bodies. It's maybe a little bit more obvious in species like that the plant body is actually a pair of succulent leaves that are fused together.
Fused, yeah.
And and some of them, like Conophytum calculus, which we just saw, the leaves are completely fused together. It's really hard to see that it's a pair of leaves. It's just this sort of spherical body. Overall, the genus these days has maybe about 110 species, but there were many more in the past that have been kind of sunken into synonymy and are all considered members of larger, more widespread, more diverse species.
What's one of their closest cousins that aren't within the genus? Is it lithops? Is it some other type of
Lithops are definitely related. Lithops are in the same family. Some of the other living stone type plants like Gibeum and Fenestraria are in the same family. So the family is Aizoaceae.
Yes.
The common name for that is the MESEMBs, after an old name for the family, which was MESEMBRyanthemaceae. So that includes some of these living stone type things. It also includes just kind of a lot of shrubby plants from the deserts of South Africa. There's a whole lot of kind of scrubby things that nobody much grows, I don't think, like the asposoma plants over here.
Right.
These guys here, which are in that family, the Aizoaceae. It also includes the ice plants, which are, grown on every highway verge in Southern California.
Yeah.
So things like Carbobrotus and Chrysanthemum.
Now, what is it about their, because it's, obviously their leaf shape and everything like that kind of gives them away, but it's really about their floral parts that makes them within that genus. And this one, it actually happens to be flowering.
Right.
And we're kind of lucky.
There's a few that bloom
it almost looks like an
months.
Asteraceae.
They do look like little daisy flowers or something. Not much similarity in terms of the actual structure of the flowers. So it's got showy petals. The petals are actually technically thought to be derived from modified stamens. So they're petaloid staminodes, not true petals probably, in the family as a whole. And they usually have a whole lot of little stamens in the middle and some carpels in the bottom with some stigmas kind of hiding among the stamens. Probably the majority of species in the genus are daytime flowering. Usually either violet or yellow flowers with a long tube at the base. They're mostly pollinated by long-tongued flies. There are a number of species that have nocturnal flowers, and we've got one example, I think, blooming
so would they be
now.
Would they be like white
here,
or?
Often white, in this case yellow.
Yellow, interesting.
This is a form of Conophytum pagei, which is probably the most widespread conophytum. It grows from kind of the Knersflachta area in the south, way up into Namibia. This is a form, used to be called Conophytum subrizum, but with fairly large yellowish flowers, often blooming in the summertime. But these are nocturnal. These will open up wide and look like little yellow daisies at night when it gets dark tonight. They'll open up. They're also very fragrant, and that's true of most of the conophytums that have nocturnal flowers.
What do they smell like? Can you describe it? Or
this one, I don't know if you can catch any smell on this.
Probably more if it's at night,
It's definitely a little bit of a sweet smell you might catch on it.
I smell a little bit of it.
It's a lot stronger at night.
It's a lot sweeter than I expected.
Yeah.
I almost thought like a dandelion, like that has a little bit more pungency, but not at all.
Yeah, quite sweet for most of the conophytums that bloom at night. Some of them I think smell a little bit like trailing arbutus, if you know that wildflower.
Yeah, I know the wildflower, but I don't think I've ever smelled it.
That has a strong fragrance.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, sweet smell, often a little bit of sort of chemicaliness to the smell.
Well, I see you could fit a lot here,
right?
Because they're so
definitely.
Small. But how many?
One of the advantages of Conophytum.
Exactly. So how many species are known in the Conophytum, and how many that are represented here?
Yeah, so it's about 110 different species, and maybe twice that number of taxa if you count the subspecies and varieties that are currently accepted. So it's a pretty large genus, one of the larger genera in the family Aizoaceae. In terms of the number of plants that I've got here, I've got most of them. There's one species that's sort of lost to science and nobody knows where it is. It's just herbarium specimens at this point.
I see.
Nobody knows where the original habitat was. People have definitely looked quite a bit. That's Conophytum semivestitum, so I don't have that. And there's another species or two, or a couple of varieties that are just very difficult to grow in cultivation, and I don't have, but I've got 95% or so of the Conophytum species and subspecies.
I would imagine that these are a little challenging to press when you're actually taking press specimens.
Right, yeah.
It's so like pressing a muffin or something.
Sometimes just kind of squashed.
Yeah.
Other times people get creative and make little sections of them and kind of slice them up into little pieces and press those flat. It's often difficult taking herbarium specimens of cacti and succulents. That's a recurring problem.
Yeah.
Some of them just don't die. You put them in a press and come back 6 months later and it's still alive.
That just goes to show how hardy they are.
Probably not Conophytums. They're delicate little guys.
Tell me about this, because this one has a really chalky appearance, whereas this one's like a bit darker green. So where would these two be growing?
These are a couple of other different genera. It's not all Conophytums in this area. There's a few other genera in the Aizoaceae. So this is Namibia, which grows in the coastal Namib Desert. And you see that kind of chalkiness in some of the Conophytums as well, but it's really well developed there. But it's probably mostly very tiny calcium oxalate crystals in the epidermis that give it that very white, chalky look to it, which in terms of the plant's adaptations, probably helps to keep it cooler, reflects away a bit of the sunlight.
Reflects the sun,
keeps it from cooking in the
But that makes me wonder
if
this one is actually growing maybe under a bush versus this one that's growing a bit more out.
This particular one is Flokia with a V. And that grows in the mountains kind of out east of Cape Town. It's a couple of species have been described now. And it looks greener in the greenhouse than it does in habitat, from what I understand. I haven't seen it in person in the wild myself, but it gets quite dark, almost black, the leaves where it grows. So we've got a few where the leaves are actually exposed and growing right now. This is a neat one, and it has the advantage of having its leaves. Leaves never kind of really completely sheath over and disappear beneath the papery remains of old leaves. And this is Conophytum Kamiesbergense, and it grows high up in the Kamiesberg Mountains, which are actually a fairly cold, high mountain range north of Cape Town. And it's probably the most winter hardy of all the Conophytums. It definitely wouldn't survive the winters in New England. But
you think of like a zone 7, a zone 8? What
possibly,
do you think?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's messed around with it.
Right.
They look like little
turtle hands,
So where it grows, it definitely receives some probably frost on a fair number of nights and even occasional wet snow. One funny characteristic of Conophytum Kamiesbergense is the plant itself has a smell. And what do you think that smells like?
Oh, wow.
I think it's kind of raspberries.
It has a sweetness to it, but there's also a funk. There's also an underlying
sweet
funk.
And something kind of pungent to it. And I think kind of smells like raspberries.
I could smell a little I know it's like tannin-esque. Like it smells like there are some tannins in there. Like there's
and
like this bitter, acrid.
That may be kind of where the smell is coming from.
Smell that, Sonder. Give it a scent. What do you think?
Some raspberries in a cardboard box about to go bad.
You see, though, you say raspberries and then you pick up the raspberry smell, you know?
Definitely has sweetness.
Yeah. This one's fun, too. Look at how it's like really fused together. Do they ever, I guess they open up.
So there's another form of Conophytum bilobum, and those will spread out a little bit more.
Oh, so that's the same. That's how that kind of,
same species,
okay,
Conophytum bilobum.
I mean, they look funny. They look like little...
Yeah, you can see they're sort of diverging a little bit there. But, you know, in the fall and September, so when it cools off and it really starts growing, those will spread out and be more obviously bilobed.
They kind of look like little cartoon characters, you know what I mean? They're just kind of funky.
Like lobster claws,
little
people
lobster
say.
claws. And then these are, they almost look like coral, like a coral reef.
Yeah, Conophytum reconditum there, and this is a different form of it. That one's a sort of greenish form. There's a different collection with more reddish, bronzy leaves.
Fascinating.
But yeah, it's a relative of Conophytum kamiasbergense, probably. And it's one of quite a number of species, little tiny guys like this, that grow in very thin soil, or mostly rocks and sand, in pans over bedrock. So they grow in sort of very shallow pans of sandy soil, right over the rock. And it's often tiny little things like this. If it was in the wild, it would be really hiding down among the substrate.
And then this one looks like it's almost flat-topped.
Yeah, so that's Conophytum jucundum. It's maybe a relative of a newly described species, Conophytum cratériforme. Sort of a funny form of Conophytum jucundum, probably, is how that ought to be identified.
The skin almost looks amphibious to me.
Yeah, it's, so still growing, still hasn't quite gone dormant.
Do you ever try to grow them through their dormancy? Is that possible, or do you just respect the dormancy?
Yeah, I try to respect the dormancy and try to keep them kind of as natural looking as I can. I know at least with some of the really more robust species like Conophytum bilobum, people sometimes just try and water them year round and keep them going, and they'll do okay. They'll look kind of funky, but some of them will survive that. Some of the more difficult ones definitely won't. You know, I know some of the big wholesale nurseries in Southern California have tried to grow these, and I think often without a whole lot of success, because they try and grow them like mammillarias or something and just water them all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of these will just kind of melt down and rot during the summertime if you try to keep them going.
So you keep them relatively dry during dormancy, or are you watering a little bit? How do you
Yeah, a little bit of light
that?
water. So even in the summertime where they grow, they do get a little bit of dew, a little bit of condensation at night. They're not totally bone dry the whole time. So I do lightly water them a bit during their dormant period.
What about that Rubenesque one right over there that's kind of still very green?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit fatter than it should be. Conophytum globosum here. One of several, like Conophytum calculus that we saw earlier, where
it plays to its name.
They're just really tough, really adapted to a dry desert environment. And here in New England, they kind of don't want to go dormant during the summertime. They'll hang onto their leaves, and I'll try and starve them and eventually force them to lose their old leaves. If you let the leaves kind of stack up over the summertime and the plant never goes dormant, and the leaves will just sort of build up and you'll get multiple pairs of leaves, which is very unnatural looking, and it's also probably not very healthy for the plant.
That's what it is called too, stacking, right? When they start to...
Yeah, people call it that.
Yeah, okay. So it just kind of... And do they get taller? Like, are they unable to actually pull themselves in, or...
Right.
Or do they flop
that might
over?
Be kind of a problem.
Yeah.
In general, if the plants aren't getting enough light and if they're getting too much water and fertilizer, they'll get leggy and they may get a little bit stemmy and really kind of not look as compact. And even if the plant is surviving, I think you're kind of missing the point of growing conophytums if your conophytums are green year-round, and kind of leggy and skinny.
Well, this is really for, I think, the plant connoisseur, because a lot of folks who grow plants, they want them to look big and beautiful all year round, and these are very small, demure, and then for half of the year, they're looking a little papery and brown.
Right, yeah, definitely if you want to have a plant collection that looks dead for 6 months out of the year, Conophytums are the way to go.
You're really selling it, Matt. He's like the one lone person who's like growing them and loving every single one of them. And then when you decided to take some to show, is it just what is looking the best on the...
Right, yeah, I grabbed a few plants from here for the plant show just to bring in some examples of some Conophytums that probably nobody else would have. I do have plants at home, so the plants that were in kind of fancy bonsai pots and whatnot were ones that I've got at home under lights. So I do have not quite this many, but I've got a decent collection of Conophytum plants at home, sort of my personal plants.
Okay, tell me about how you're growing them in your house, because obviously it's very different here when you have a glass house and you have the ambient light coming in.
Yeah, so up here in this rooftop greenhouse with full sun all day long is really ideal for them. But at home, I do have a few plants maybe on a south-facing windowsill, and some of the hardier ones do okay with that. But most of my Conophytums at home are under lights.
So like an LED light, and then
LED light, benches or. And
are you growing
shelves.
them like a couple inches under the LED light, or is it quite far?
Right. Yeah. So with these guys, the lights are here and the plants are here.
Got it.
And just a few inches away from the lights. And I use kind of a mixture of cool white shop lights and some grow lights, some broad spectrum grow lights.
And are you respecting also their dormancy indoors as well? So you keep the lights on while they're going dormant?
Yeah, so I do, if I think about it, I change the photo period a bit and give them a longer photo period in the summer, which encourages them to go dormant. With the plants at home in my basement under lights, it's often more trouble than even here in the New England greenhouse to get them to go dormant properly in the spring.
And their photo period during the summer, is it 12, 14 hours? What do you...
Yeah, in the summer they get sort of 12, 13 hours, I guess, and I dial it back a couple hours maybe during the winter time.
That's great for anybody who wants to take the leap and say, hey, these are kind of cool. Like they're really, an underserved plant, and we want to give them a try indoors, even though you might not have like a greenhouse condition. So that's really helpful. Are there any others that you'd like to showcase, or anything else about the Conophytum that you'd like to sell or undersell in that case?
Yeah, so here's one of my favorites here, and unfortunately very dormant right now.
But we can always show a photo of it, like when it's not dormant.
You can see a little bit of the leaves peeking out. This is Conophytum bachellorum, and it was found, I think it was around 1980 or so, by a guy named Anthony Mitchell, who was doing work on mainly Conophytums in South Africa. And he sort of didn't want anybody to know where it came from. It's a very distinctive thing with these sort of reddish purple leaves.
Little buttons.
It flowers at really the wrong time of year. It's one of the very few Conophytums that flowers in the spring as the plants are going dormant, so it's done flowering now. Most of them flower in September or so, or in the fall. But yeah, it's a rare thing, comes from just one ridge top, one sort of ridge made out of white quartz in South Africa. Nobody knew where it was for many years. I think there was maybe one plant in cultivation derived from Mitchell's collections in the UK.
And did you do that to just kind of protect the plant from over-harvesting?
Yeah, he was trying to protect it from poachers. And we'll get back to that, unfortunately. In 2000, I think it might have been 2004, a hiker who was way out in the middle of nowhere found the spot where this grows, and somebody saw his photographs and identified, oh my God, that's Conophytum bachellorum. It's a wasp species. I happened to be in South Africa that year. I had the permit. I collected a few seeds, collected a couple dozen seeds from a couple different spots on the ridge, and grew them out. And I've got the plants here.
You have quite a lot, actually.
Quite a lot of them. I've grown these all from seed or seeds of seed. I produce a lot of seed here in the greenhouse and send it out to places like the National Cactus and Succulent Society here in the U.S., the CSSA.
It's almost better to spread it around just in case you do lose it in situ.
Yeah. So I've been trying to get seeds around. Unfortunately, about 5 years ago, there was a big fad in Conophytums, and there was a lot of problems with poaching, and the poachers did find the place where this guy grows, and from what I understand, there's very few left of them in the wild right now.
That's sad. This is where it's hard for people who love plants. It's like this obsession, and where does that obsession begin and end? And do we actually know the repercussions of the things that we love or are obsessed with?
Yeah. So this is it's listed as critically endangered now. It's probably almost extinct in the wild, and that's unfortunately true of a number of the rarer, sort of more interesting little conophytums.
I mean, in South Africa in general, a lot of these kinds of plants seem to be poached to no end. One of the more popular plants to unfortunately poach.
Yeah, and I think, from what I understand, I think the poachers have moved on a lot from Conophytum these days. It's the fad has maybe faded, but there's other groups. I think some of the geophytes, some of the tuberous plants from South Africa maybe getting hit now. Fashions are moving around, and unfortunately every time something becomes popular, you get problems with illegal collection and poaching.
This is why Matt's downplaying his Conophytum genus. He's like, do you really want a plant that looks like this for 6 months out of the year? No, but in all seriousness, really understand where your plants come from. I give you mad props for actually growing a lot from seed as well, and just kind of propagating as you go.
I mean, essentially all this collection is from seed, collected with permits by me or by other people, or traded back and forth with other botanical gardens or other collectors. We're fortunate here in the U.S. that we've got a couple different nurseries that have specialized in conophytums and lithops since way back when. So Mesa Garden in New Mexico, a little bit south of Albuquerque, where I did a lot of work when I was in college. I would travel out there in the summertime and work for the summer. But yeah, they've grown these plants for ages and distribute seed, often with wild locality data, and sort of very carefully identified.
That's great to
They're
know.
very serious about it.
Yeah.
A guy named Stephen Hammer is pretty much the world expert in Conophytum. He lives in Southern California, and he also sells plants and seeds. Yeah, so a funny thing about Conophytum seed capsules, and most other members of that family, is that they're sensitive to moisture. And they, even when the seed capsule is ripe and it's dry and it's dead, just storing the seeds inside, it'll open up in response to water. And so if I spray the seed capsules here.
Oh, that one I think already opened up.
Yeah.
That one right there.
In just a minute or so, it opens up wide and exposes the seeds inside.
That's how sensitive it is,
And it's
right here, this one's opening up, I think. And so is this one.
It's just kind of a characteristic of the cells that make up the seed capsule. The ones on kind of the inner portions of those coverings are kind of spongy and can soak up water, and they expand when they're exposed to moisture.
Yeah.
And open up the seed capsule.
And that's how you collect
and it's a sort of an obvious way of collecting the seeds. Actually, when I'm processing seeds, I generally just pick off the capsule and grind it up between my fingers and sieve out the seeds. It's faster and cleaner.
I see.
But yeah, it's sort of an obvious way of collecting the seeds. It's just to put the seed capsule in a glass of water and let them fall out.
The seeds are tiny.
The seeds are tiny. They're almost like dust.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's thought to be an adaptation that during any dry periods and during the summer, the seeds are protected inside the capsules. Little insects and things can't get to them. They're hidden away in there. When rains come in the fall, they'll open up in response to the water, and a raindrop will fall in there and splash the seeds
it everywhere.
around.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like the little bird's nest fungus that we have right around here, where it has the little spores, and then the raindrop goes and they go flying all over the place. That's very cool. Thank you for showing us that.
Right, no problem.
It's like a little Conophytum party trick. Well, we're lucky to have you as well, and this beautiful collection. I really appreciate that you took us through it. Even though I know we came off season, maybe we should come back in September to see them all in bloom. That was probably very spectacular. Yeah, I'm sure you have some good photos of that
flowers.
too.
Oh,
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks
you. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you. We're doing group botanical tours later this year next to Costa Rica and Thailand. Now, even though the trips are sold out, if you'd like to go, be sure to sign up to the wait list because we may be able to do an additional trip for those interested. Go to homesteadbrooklyn.com, click the Learn tab, and head over to Botanical Tours for more information or find the link below in the description. And if it's something that you'd like to do in the future, be sure to sign up anyway so you know when next trips launch. We'll see you in the next video or on one of the tours.